Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm back with another recap movie review. So today we have Alone in the Dark. Now I believe this movie was on Lifetime, but then they also put it on Tubi, so I watched it on Tubi. It stars Novi Brown. I forgot the other characters' names, but it is what it is though. So it basically starts off with this woman in the park, right? She's supposed to be doing a run or whatever, and she's on the phone talking to somebody she knows. So she notices that every time she stops, there is a guy behind her, and she can hear the footsteps. So she will walk, stop. The guy will walk, stop. And then after she got off the phone with her friend, she noticed it, and then she stepped to the side and she tried to call another friend, but they wasn't picking up. So the person just walked right past her, so she didn't think nothing of it. So she decided to turn back around and walk. As she did so, the guy came, drug her out of the park and killed her. So fast forward, Novi Brown, she plays Brianna or Bree Miller. She's on house arrest because of her ex-husband Michael Miller. Supposedly did something like mass murders and stuff like that. So now she's looked at as a bad person. So she lives in this vacation house on the lakefront, and I think Sandpoint Drive Lake, whatever. She lives there. So she's on house arrest there while her ex-husband, is in jail, supposed to be serving a 10-year sentence. So she gets out of the house, and she can only go so far within her home, or the cops will her probation officer will come to the house and give her warnings. If she doesn't comply, eventually she'll end up going to jail. So one day she's out in her yard putting out some red flags, and I guess to see how far she can go, the distance. So there was a neighbor that was across the street, and she waved at them, and they're basically looking on her phone at her picture, saying that do not be involved. Like, you know how people get when they see stuff on the news that they don't really know about the person, but they assume that's just what it is. So that's what they did. And they had a child with them. So they're basically looking on their phone. The child runs out in the street because of the ball. She runs into the street to save the kid from getting hurt. And the parents look up and was like, get off of my child, get off of my child. Mind you, she just saved the kid's life. Y'all don't even care about that. Y'all just worried about what y'all think y'all know about her, but that's not the case. So eventually, her PO noticed that her ankle monitor signaled that she wasn't in her house. So eventually they came out, and I guess they didn't even let her explain herself, but whatever. The probation officer was like, listen, you only got a few more warnings. Other than that, you can go back to jail. And she was like, do you want that? She was like, no. So eventually she left, and she goes to run her a bath, right? And no, before she runs her bath, her friend comes over, who's a lawyer. Her name is Sophia. And she talks to her, and she was like, well, listen, you only got a few more months of this, so, try to keep it together. And she was like, yeah, I know. She also asked her, because basically Bree is staying in that big house by herself, so she also asked Sophia to stay with her that night, but she was like, no, I got court in the morning. So she was like, she left. So she goes to run her a bath, but before she do that, she goes down to the wine cellar. And in the wine cellar, like the signal of the ankle monitor, it gets weak. So the probation officer thinks that she's not home. So she calls her. She was like, yeah, listen, I'm downstairs in the basement, but I'll be right back upstairs. So she gets her wine. She goes upstairs to go take her bath. And while she's taking a bath, she starts hearing these sounds. And the house is playing music first. So it's a smart house. And she tells the house to be quiet. And then she starts hearing this glass shattering. So she gets up out of her bath and she goes to check to see what's going on. There's nothing there. So she gets dressed and I guess she goes to sleep. And then it's the next day. The next day, she's still in the house. She can't really do much, nothing. I believe this is when she gets a break-in to her house. And then she starts receiving these pictures, like little Polaroids. And then Sophia comes back to the house. And she explains to her what happened. And Sophia hires or gets a detective to come to the house so that they can speak to her. Because what happened was not necessary. And it shouldn't have happened. And then Brita also want to call the police because it's like she's on probation. They just probably gonna think like, oh, she's just trying to find ways so she can get out of being on house arrest. So that's her thoughts. So eventually, the detective comes to the house. His name is Detective Joe Hall. And also Sophia referred her to somebody else to help protect the home because she didn't feel like the detective was going to do his job, which he didn't do. And it was somebody named by the name of Xavier Hall or something like that. So she gets his card and she calls him and he comes to protect her. She was like, listen, I'll pay you. Because he was going to do it, what she's going to pay him. But then she basically wanted to get to know him and stuff like that. So she was like, I'll pay you double. So we're going to fast forward. Because let's just say, even with Xavier there, that whole entire time, she would still get pictures on her window. And she's like, well, what does this mean? So then Xavier talks to her and tells her, like, well, listen, she started feeling him too. So she started wearing nice clothes and looking presentable and stuff like that. Then one day, she made him dinner. And he was like, what's this? I know he peeped it too. He was like, well, what's this? She was like, well, you got to eat. I am your boss. So eventually she went inside to get his food. And he decided to come inside. So they started talking. He was eating. And he was like, listen, I know you. I know you used to run track. You have a sister. You from a lower middle class family. And then Bree was trying to figure him out. She was like, you're the type of person that has like social anxiety. Like you stay to yourself. Because I can tell through your social skills. Like you're not that person that's like want people all up in your business. Which I understand. That's normal. So, we're going to fast forward this. Come to find out, the girl that got missing in the beginning of the movie, that turned out to be his sister, Cheyenne, that he was basically looking for 2 years. Come to find out, Bree thought Michael was behind it this whole entire time. Nope. It was the mistress that he was seeing. Turns out he was seeing Cheyenne. Also, Sophia, her friend, the lawyer, she was screwing her husband too. Like, she was so jealous of the fact that Bree, it shows that he got a thing for black women because both of them girls, Cheyenne and Bree, were black. She probably hired somebody to kill, which was Joe. Joe Hall. Turns out he's not even a detective. That's somebody that Sophia represented, and his real name is Joe Mitchell. And she basically hired Joe to get rid of Cheyenne. And Xavier was trying to find out what was wrong with his sister. And that's how everything came together. So long story short, Sophia orchestrated that whole thing. She represented Joe Mitchell at one point. And she had him in the back of her pocket. Also, she was screwing Michael. And yeah, it was crazy. Like, y'all gotta watch it. It's called Alone in the Dark. Y'all gotta check it out. Y'all probably check it out on Tubi. It's really good. So, Joe ends up coming back to her house, right? And Oh, also, I'm going to skip ahead. Also, during that time frame of trying to figure out who was watching her in her house because she was getting the Polaroids, she was able to get out of her house with the help of Xavier's friend Dax or Dex to buy the what the heck to read the system of her ankle monitor so that you can see that her phone is now her ankle monitor, that the PO will always know that she's home, but she wasn't home. So she was able to break into Michael's house, look through some of his footage from the lake house, and doing so, he was there with some girl. And once he had figured out, because she know the layout of the land because she used to live there. So once he figured out in his room is a safe room, Michael figured out that it was open, and he goes to look and sees nothing's in there. And he goes to go back out and check to his girl. Mind you, Xavier and Bree, they hiding somewhere underneath the bed. So Michael talks to the girl, and she was like, I wasn't in your things. He was like, yes, you was. So eventually she didn't like that, so she ended up leaving. So he leaves to go behind her. So while they're leaving, Bree and Xavier is underneath the bed. Bree comes out, and Xavier's getting ready to come out, and he peeps this phone underneath the what the heck you call them? The frame. So he pulls out the phone and takes it into his pocket. They end up rolling downstairs while Michael's in the kitchen. And I guess Michael notices he hears some sounds. So they double back into the living room and hide behind the banister of the staircase. And he goes to shut the door and nothing there. So he ends up going back into the kitchen. Then they leave out the house. And Michael notices that he hears more sounds. So he goes to check the door. They go standing on the side of the house. And he comes out to check, and he don't see nothing, so he goes back in. And they eventually get in the car and go back to the house. While they're on the road, the PO officer is calling Bree like, we're at your house. Where you at? Where you at? Where you at? Because your signal is not picking up. Luckily, they was able to get back into the house without nobody seeing them. And she was like, listen, I told you I was here. I told you I was here. They're like, yeah, whatever. So they was trying to arrest her. And Bree was like, listen, y'all already took my sanity, my peace, my freedom, my other house, my money, my everything. This is the one thing I need. Just give me a break. So eventually they let off with a warning. Because for some odd reason, Xavier and the PO know each other. So they gave her a pass. So after that, Joe comes into the house while she's there, and supposedly she gets a call from Joe because he's portraying as a detective. And while she's hearing this information, Michael gets ran over by an RV. So after that, Xavier comes to the house, and he's talking to her, and that's when she gets the phone call, Bree, that Joe said that Xavier is the bad guy. He's been in and out of jail for this. You see the crimes and stuff like that. So she started listening to the detective. Meanwhile, back at Michael's house, he done got home from his accident, and the cops were there. He was like, listen, I already talked to some detective, Joe Hall. And the cops were like, there is no detective by the name of Joe Hall. So now it makes sense, like, wow, who is this person who I told this information to? So, gets back to Bree's house. Xavier comes home like, listen, I finally was able to crack the hard drive from the lake house. And she was like, nah, I'm good. She packed all his stuff, put it in a box, and put it outside. So basically, she let him go. And he basically told him that I don't want to deal with you no more. While her friend Sophia was there standing in the background just watching like. So Xavier leaves. Brianna takes the footage and she goes home. The next day or later on that night, she takes a shower or whatever, and she starts scouring through the footage, and she sees like some of the stuff that makes sense. So that's when Joe ends up breaking into the house, and he ties her up. And before that, she calls the police. She's upstairs in her house. She calls the police while her friend is there as well. And she was like, Xavier's RV is still here. So that's when the guy comes in, Joe, dressed all in black, comes in and punches her in the face, ties her up to the chair, and also punches out Sophia, has her somewhere in the closet. So when eventually Bree comes to, she sees Xavier knocked out on the couch and the guy is standing up over her. Well, after she done tried to get loose from the chair, she fell. So she's now laying on the floor and the guy is standing up on top of her. And she's trying to get out of the chair because he tied her hands up. Long story short, she eventually gets out. She starts fighting the guy. And he attacks Sophia and she's upstairs, somewhere in the closet. And they're tussling each other. Somehow or another, she was able to knock him out, and then she runs to Xavier, tell him to wake up, because Joe said he drugged Xavier, but eventually that worked. So she knocks him out. She goes outside, and then he's trying to attack her, and he has this knife coming at her. So eventually she did this move that Xavier taught her, and it didn't work because he was still trying to come after her. So eventually Xavier has this knife. He woke up from his trance or whatever, and he throws the knife and it hits Joe in the shoulder. So them two is now fighting, and then for some reason Joe pulls a knife out of his shoulder and ends up stabbing Xavier in the stomach. So Xavier passes out onto the side while Joe is still after Bree learns to do these other moves to Joe. She ends up bashing his head in with a rock 3 times, so he's out cold. And Xavier, he's hurt. Long story short, the cops do come to the house, and they take Xavier to the hospital. The next day, somehow or another, Bree tampered with her ankle monitor and so that it could record everything that was going on. So she confronted Sophia. You are the main common denominator between all of this. So what happened? Then come to find out, when she was watching the footage, that Michael was doing Cheyenne and doing her at the same time. And so basically she got everything that Sophia said recorded onto her ankle monitor, and that the cops was there, and she got arrested and she got off of house arrest. And then fast forward another year later, her and Xavier was going strong. They decided to move out of that place. And she's actually glad that she got her freedom, which is I'm happy for her. This was definitely a great movie. I definitely have to check it out. It's on Tubi right now. I'm not sure if you can still watch it on Lifetime or the Lifetime Movie Network. But yeah, definitely need to check it out. It's called Alone in the Dark. I highly recommend it. Watch it. It's definitely great to see. And yeah. So with that being said, I hope you enjoyed this recap. And I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye.